Man, how you doing, Curtis, brother? What's going on with you?
There's a lot going on in the world, bruh. I got a heavy heart, what's going on in Minnesota right now, but I got to keep looking forward, bro. This is why we come together. Glad to catch up with you this week. Put our heads together, man. It's when you're out here isolated, you need to connect with the good brothers, man. So I'm glad to see you, man. How are you doing, bro?
Same. It's a lot going on. I'm actually in Chicago, and that video came out, so that was wild, man. Still sad about the DMX passing. That dude meant a lot to me. And the bittersweet news. I've been working on it for a while, but my audio book finally came out, Beyond Grit and Resilience.
Big up, audio
book, and the book's been out for a while. Like, I was actually on tour when the when the pandemic hit, and then I did the audio book, man. Maybe I finished that maybe 7-8 months ago, to be real with you. And then it just got caught up with Audible and then the pandemic, but it's finally out. You can get that thing. But yeah, man, but I'm happy to be on this last Friday with you, brother. This is our last one for the time being, man.
Is it the last one, bro?
For the time being, man. Well, let me just tell people what we've done thus far, right? What we've done so far is in this 3-episode arc, right? And we got our super producer back there. Let me there you go. I got you. In this arc, we started with the past, right? We had to talk about our future. We had to talk about our past and like how we got here, right? Like, what was our history? And I think you did an amazing job talking about a lot about our Black educational history. I talked about mine a little bit, but just really setting that foundation was important. The episode after that was about the now. What are we doing now? What are our receipts? How are we actually helping Black people? How are we helping our people, as opposed to just being Twitter superstars or people on social media that do a lot of talking but don't do work? Our work fuels what we talk about. And today, we're going to shift into like the future. Like, what actually needs to happen for our kids to get what they need? What does the future of education need to look like for us to be liberated? So that's what this episode is. The future, aka dopeness is forever. So and I want to shout out before we jump into it, our super producer Mimi, who has just done an amazing job through this short run. And none of this would have been possible without her, and even everything down to the questions and just thinking critically about how we address this conversation. I just wanted to make sure that the world know who did that. So kudos to you. And but from there, man, so how you feeling about the topic today? And then, our producer can put in that first question and get us started at any time.
Well, man, I think I'm a historian who thinks about the future, as I'm looking at the past. And I think for me, a lot of this is cyclical. And I often talk about a lot of the breadcrumbs that our ancestors left us will direct us to the future. And a lot of this is, a lot of what we're going to talk about now is, what's next. But what you're going to hear from me is a lot of what we've learned already. And so I think this is why I'm glad that we sort of started with what the ancestors were able to do with so little. With the ancestor foundation they led, how they defined self-determination, but also what was lost and what history we really talk about, because oftentimes we can kind of get on our own way if we don't know where we've come from. And so, we've outside of Black History Month, we have to, as a people, keep reminding ourselves not of our greatness in what we've done, but the process. I'm all about, saying, let's tell that backstory. Let's tell about all the work that went in to the preparation, the recovery, the resilience, the organization, the coordination, and the collaboration that led to a lot of the wins. But also, let's not forget the impact of some of this. We talked about Brown versus Board of Education, right, and some of the untold impact that's had on us, particularly Black educators. And so we have to talk about a lot of what the future holds for us is us reckoning with the past, understanding where we are, where we need to go, but also listening to our ancestors, because I think they've given us a lot of, they've given us a blueprint. I think they've given us a blueprint.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, man. I think, when we talk about what does freedom in our future look like, Curtis, where do you land on that? So you talked a little bit about how our past and how rich it is and how it's shaping what that future should be and how it is. But like, to you, What does freedom in our future look like?
Freedom, I mean, looks like a lot of, I think when we came out of Reconstruction, we were a people who had, more so than any other race in this country, a vision for what we wanted for our children, particularly. And that vision was the freedom to, make our own decisions about where we lived, what we did for a living, who we married, because for generations, we just didn't have that. And so for me, freedom is the ability to make our own decisions,
okay,
for our children, and to make our decisions within our own community that we believe are going to move our community forward.
I can dig that, man. I can dig that. I think for me, I think it's similar. I think freedoms are my yeses meaning yes and my no's meaning no. It is being able to be respected around the things that I need and what I want to do, and having the actual liberty to be able to do it, where people are not infringing on that. You're not telling me what I can and can't say. You're not telling me how I should or shouldn't necessarily raise my kids. I think that is just really, really important. And I think that as we talk about that, when I talk about freedom in the sense of education, we talked about this a little bit, right? Like, I think we need to move away from the term, I've done this in my work, move away from the terms and language of education reform to that of academic liberation or liberation through education, or whatever the case is, right? And I think if we're really going to do this work and have an impact, what has to change about education, or what has to change within us to make that even a possibility? I don't think that that's a possibility right now. I think that right now, there are some people who have options or choices that they can make around schools, and there are some people that don't. There are some people that still is stuck with that school and stuck with those educators, be they good or bad. And I think that our kids, our babies, the people that's supposed to lead us into that future are being like handed a false bill of goods, and it's not setting us up to be sustainable, and not just sustainable. Who wants to just be sustainable, but to thrive? And so I think that there are some big changes that kind of need to happen. So freedom for me in the future looks like we are actually educating our kids at a high level, and not just like comparing how well they're doing with their peers, right? I'm talking about getting back on a global scale and like really looking at how Black kids are faring globally, not just in the United States, but globally. And really like getting back to that point of excellence, and also making I just think that ancillary education is going to be the future. Like, it's not going to just be what we have in classrooms right now. So I'll stop because I get long-winded on that, but I got a whole list on that, bro. So I got a whole list, man. But I don't know if that made sense. I know I went kind of far with that. But
I'll say this, man, before we move on. I was talking with a brother earlier this week who's starting his own school in Atlanta. And young brother, man, 20s. Mm-hmm. And, I was telling him, I said, man, I just want you to know that you're a part of a history. You're part of a continuum of Black school founders. And he was talking about the model of school he wants, and how what he's going to call the teachers, and what the school day is going to look like for the students, and the impact, the role the students are going to play in designing the school and designing the curriculum. And I kind of had to remind him, just sort of, but also I think to remind the students and the parents and the people in the community, because him creating a school is not going to necessarily totally, secure that they're going to have people who enroll and trust and say, this is where I want to send my child. And in some ways, that's something that we have to also unpack as well. That, it's leaders move, but we also have to understand how to bring the people with us and what it's going to take to do that. Because my definition of freedom, your definition of freedom may not be the same definition as other people, but we have to sort of meet people where they are, fill in the gaps with a lot of this stuff, because otherwise there's a lot of us just talking about it and not really seeing the fruits of our labor.
Well, I think that was a good segue, man. I think we should stay on the big picture, man, because we got that question below, like, moving forward, what can self-determination look like in our communities? You can take a stab at that one first, and then I'll tackle the next one first or whatnot. But what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, again, this freedom and self-determination, this ability to really live outside of the confines of systems that in many ways were not really built with our long-term success in mind. But again, how we unpack that to those in our community who become gatekeepers, become wedded, become the very, sort of shepherds of the very systems that, we try every day to try to respond to. And a lot of the work that we do, unfortunately, is in response to, as opposed to being more proactive and creating. This self-determination for me is like, what are you creating versus having to respond to? And this is what I think we hear a lot about what's happening in the community and what's happening right now in places like Minnesota and others. A lot of it is responding to what has been done to us, and almost like this idea of having to continue to respond and respond and respond over and over again kind of gets to the way of us saying, here's what I want for the world. Here's what I want to create. And that self-determination is a time we spend not only responding to, but creating, sort of thinking outside of the box, thinking sort of with a kind of a blank slate about what education will look like, what health is going to look like, what food will look like, what transportation will look like, what housing will look like, as opposed to trying to fight for the very things that other communities get without having to fight really at all. And so I think for me, it's that ability to think for ourselves without having to respond to how systems are continuing to push us backwards.
I think I agree. I think I got a slight push, and I think we might be saying the same thing, but just there might be a little bit of a nuanced difference. Listen, I'm a person that respects policy, right? Like I respect policy a lot. Policy alone ain't gonna get us where we need to go. Like policy, even the best intended policy, there's always unintended consequences that tend to fall in the laps and curse Black people. You know what I mean? And we talked about that with Brown versus Board, but there's a bunch of stuff that was built on the guise of helping Black people. But then when the benefits came, it helped everybody but Black people. And then the shortcomings were, landed directly with us. So, but that's why I'm so big on agency and self-determination. You said something where it was like, well, right now, when you look at Minnesota or you look at Chicago or whatever, and we just have to continuously fight or whatnot. I think we got to keep fighting, but I think that it's fighting towards, I think the type of goals we set around what we're fighting for, I think will evolve. And I think to the point of, this is the thing that we want. So when I talk about self-determination, when I talk about agency, I really, really think that there has to be just a change in how we advocate for ourselves, we advocate for our families, we advocate for our neighborhoods, we advocate for our cities. And that's going to be the crux of self-determination for me. So again, when I go back, I'm gonna go back to this ancillary education piece. It wasn't my schools that got me to where I'm at. It was the boys club. It was my church. It was mentors. It was a whole myriad of things, because in the education that I got, and now as I travel the country talking to students about what they want to see, kids have been asking for so much stuff. They've been asking to learn about finances, like Dogecoin, Dogcoin, or whatever it's called. That stuff is super high right now, and kids are going and teaching themselves about that stuff on YouTube. Kids been asking for a long time how to deal with taxes, right? How do we do that? What's going on with that? And they not getting it. We're not teaching our kids how to eat healthy. We're not teaching them about what goes in their body or whatever. Everything is processed. And I remember there's a lot of places right now that, in the past, they used to teach kids how to plant food and do all that stuff. There are some schools that do it, but not every school does it. And then either other stuff, like what a mental health services what are they going to look like in a little bit? You know what I'm saying? Like for Black folks. And I think all that stuff has to be a part of this self-determination package, right? Where you make these demands. And if your school can't do it, then buck that school and work with a community organization or work with a group of elders. I think that we have to stop waiting for a system to improve that has shown you for over 100 years that it does not want to improve. It does not want to budge. That thing ain't gonna move. And you can keep getting on your knees and talking to the wall if you want to. But for me and mine, there will be different steps being taken to ensure we get what we need.
And I think, what I started off saying is, I think there are examples of how our ancestors were able to do some of that in a different way. And so I might have mentioned on a previous episode about the manual training school in Bordentown, New Jersey, which was led by an ancestor of mine, William Valentine, in 1915 and 1953. And the school was a self-encompassing boarding school, public for Black children. all Black educators, educated Ivy and historically Black colleges. But it was self-encompassing where the students planted all the food that they ate, cooked the food, did all the, the gardening, the maintenance, the construction, the carpentry, and they left with education, but also a skill set and an ability to, again, determine whether they wanted to go into the military, become entrepreneurs, go in government. And so I think oftentimes people try to say, we have this conversation around whether people should go to college or not, or anything. My thing is, whatever you want to do, I just want to give you the freedom to be able to make that decision. Whether you want to be a beautician or a botanist, that's not for me to tell you which one you should be. I want you to have that freedom. And this idea that, we have had in the past, our ancestors who, because we were operating outside of a lot of this public institution, because we were not being supported financially by them, that did give us a level of freedom to be able to decide curriculum and things like that, because they were underfunding us and they didn't have any faith that we'd be able to do what we said we would. And we continued to defy the odds and really, as my man Brian talks about just being stereotype killers, that there are examples of how we were able to build our own with our own hands, replicate, grow. And then, you see right now, historically Black colleges, Morehouse College, my alma mater is 150 years old, started in the basement of a church. Whoever thought 150 years later, this school would be still standing. That is what we had in the past. But I think as we move forward,
the people that built it. I said the people that built it, they knew.
The people that built it. But this idea of, who's the next generation of college founders? Whatever those schools are, those training schools, whatever that is, whether it be a school for financial literacy or a school for entrepreneurship, and whether you say, I want to create this institution to ensure the next generation has these skills. Whatever that looks like, I want people to walk into that space, unashamed, unapologetic, and encouraged that it's been done before.
Right. No, I think, listen, man, even in that question that was just up that flashed and went away, I think that you were kind of touching on that, right? Like, I agree with you. I think when I'm thinking about liberatory education, I'm thinking how Jesus thought about the church, right? Where it's like, church ain't in the building, right? Like it's where two or more are gathered, right? You can have service. He was like, get out that church. And I think that part of it is going to be like, get out the traditional image of school in your mind. I think that liberatory education is outside of those walls. I think it is actually teaching you things that are germane to your survival and thriving. So I think that, like, when you talk about, Morehouse, and Morehouse is just such an important institution to Black men, and Black people in general, and just the history of that and what they built something to last. You can spot a Morehouse man from 100 miles away. It's just, I know it. Oh yeah, that dude went to Morehouse. Such and such? I don't know him. I promise you he went to Morehouse. You know what I'm saying? But instilling that sense of pride. Like, I'm looking at schools right now that have Black leaders, and all those kids have so much pride because that leader is instilling a sense of pride in them, a swag in them. So when we talk about liberatory education in the future, it's not just going to be it can't just be some building that you have to go to by law, or they'll put you in jail, or truancy police to show up at your house. It has to be something that's helping you define who you are. It has to be something that is like making you proud to be you and in that community and Black or whatever you are. You know what I'm saying? Let's really break down the word to liberate. You know what I'm saying? Like, and to liberate means that you are setting something free with agency, with a say-so over his or her life. And I think that's, if your education is not setting people free to live the type of life they want and to thrive and be healthy doing it and to be critical minded and critical thinkers, then it's not liberatory education. So what it needs to look like in the future is again, we should have people coming out of school with like skills, man. You know what I'm saying? There was a time when you could leave high school and know how to like work on cars. Like, there was a time when that was a thing. You know what I mean? And I think that as of lately, in the last 40, 50 years, they started to shift from high schools providing those type of services to community college being the people that provide those services. But I'm just saying, there are so many ways for our people to be great and get what they need that I think we got such a long way to go. But that's what liberatory education look like for scholars, in my view.
Let me say this. I mean, again, I'm going to put my hat on as a father,
Mm-hmm.
and look at my two kids.
Right.
You know, I think this idea of I think we are born liberated. Like when you come out, when you bring a child home, what we do as parents, as adults, is we put all the restrictions on children to the point where by the time we get to our age, we have to be literally retooled in order to get back to where we were when we came out. And this idea, they do this old survey where you go into a room of 5-year-olds and ask them how many of you are creative, and they're all, I'm creative, right? Then you go in a room of 25-year-olds and say, how many are creative? And like 3 people come up, raise their hand. You know, I'm the artist, I'm the musician, maybe, I'm an interior designer or whatever that is. But but over those 20 years, what happened? Like biologically, they're the same person, but we beat them down. And so I think about my 10-year-old daughter and my 12-year-old son. My 10-year-old daughter has already started her own small business. Mm-hmm. She's already made nearly $1,500 in a small business on her own. Mm-hmm. In 8 years, my wife and I are gonna have to, make the case to my daughter of why she should spend 4 years in college. When by that time, I imagine she'll probably have employees, right, in a brand and making as much money as college graduates. And we'll have to come to a determination and saying, is this the best use of your 4 years? And is this 4 years going to set you up for the next 40 versus you spending, you're 10 years old and us sort of kind of getting out of the way and trying to be supportive of the liberatory education she's even curating for herself. And my son is as well. And so as parents, we have to kind of check ourselves, and adults check ourselves around, how we create the enabling environment for our children to thrive in a liberatory mindset that I think they have or naturally, that a lot of us, I think we kind of had as children, but we have been indoctrinated to be to police ourselves, to be more accommodating, and those things. And a couple of us make it through, and then some of us sort of are able to get around the right people and reform our minds. But a lot of it's just because we haven't respond to 20 years or 30 years of a lot of the same indoctrination, unfortunately. But I think these children come out liberated, bro.
Well, I think that's I'm a push, but I think that's a beautiful statement, the way that you said that. And if you don't mind, can I ask what college your wife went to? I'm just curious.
Guess.
I have no idea, brother. I never met your wife. I can't guess.
Well, I went to Morehouse.
So she went to Spelman?
Yes, sir.
You can always tell Morehouse Negroes wherever you go. Of course.
You can't tell them much. You can't tell them much. That's what he said.
But here's why I asked that though, right? Because your kids are growing up in a house with 2 college educated Black parents who know their history, who also went to these super historic Black colleges, and their dad right now is sitting in his study with books behind him. I'm just saying, right? Your kids came out liberated. I was born in a different situation. I was born with 2 parents, you know what I'm saying? I was lucky because I still had 2 parents, but my parents were in the thick of we were in the thick of that crack epidemic. I lived in like shelters after shelters, right? Like I'm the first in my immediate family to go to college. I had to figure all that stuff out on my own. And when you talk about policing ourselves and things of that nature, there were rules that I just had to learn to be able to survive in Chicago or Paducah or Oakland. So I don't think that I came out liberated per se. There was a lot of rules that I had to learn, right? And I'm working on this little short story called The Black Boy and the Bear. But it's basically about, getting out the woods, running from this bear, and just how that happened and the residual impacts from that. But, you know what I'm saying? So I think that for some of our kids, some of our babies, I don't know if your kids truly understand the lottery ticket they have hit and won by being born to the parents that they have. You understand what I'm saying? And this is no shade to my own parents, but what I'm saying is there are just so many that have situations like mine, right? So when I'm thinking about liberatory education, I'm selfishly thinking about the kid that don't listen. Your schools ain't doing that. I don't care if you send your kid to the best private school or the public school or wherever. His 2 parents and her 2 parents, you know what I'm saying? Like are putting a mindset into these kids. I think you could have homeschooled your kids and they would still have this type of mindset. Their dad is a hustler. Like, yeah, they dad is right now making real men teach hoodies and t-shirts and doing this and that. They're watching daddy do these things. You know what I'm saying? Well, when I watch daddy do things, I watch daddy go to jail and I watch mom go to jail. I watched us eat off of money that wasn't really legal. I watched us go from one hustle to the next. I watched my mom like having street fights and all that stuff, right? Like, so, I'm just saying, when we talk about that, I think that there's a few different things at play. What does liberatory education look like, regardless of the type of stock you coming from or the type of standing that your parents may have? And again, this ain't me throwing shade at my parents or whatever, right? Me having a dad in the home changed things so significantly, even if he was on the wrong stuff. Listen, my dad's a big dude, a military cat. It's just some stuff that I didn't do. I didn't do it because I was just this great kid. My dad was just big and he would have got with me. You feel me? Like, I mean, it's just facts. So that's how I'm answering the question around. I like that notion. I think some of our kids are born liberated. I think a lot of them are not. And I think a lot of my friends that are no longer here grew up in an environment where they felt trapped and they felt they had a decision between a bad choice and a worse choice. And until we're able to kind of solve for that piece, I think it's going to be a struggle, man.
And I think you bring up a good point, because now the question is, what is the responsibility? What's the what role do those who have been born with the privilege have towards others? And so that's a thing. I think also about liberatory education is your coexistence with your brother and your sister, that I think we have to talk about. Because again, for those who have an environment where, again, my son sees me, but he also sees you, right? And he's looking at you and how you carry yourself and how you're able to be your authentic self. And when I first met you, you wearing your gold fronts, and I'm like, bro, this is a free black man I'm looking at right now, unapologetic. And so there are things that my son may look at me and says, Dad, there are things I may want to emulate about Dr. Cole that even, Father, you're still trying to unpack, Dad, that you're still trying to liberate yourself from, about how, and I have to receive that. At the same time, we're saying it's the ecosystem,
right?
Because your point, the teachers that we send our children to, even though they may live in a liberatory household,
right?
The teachers are trying to unpack their old stuff, and then the football coach and the dance teacher and the barber and everything that you're surrounding yourself with, you're kind of like trying to block. You're like, all right, playing the jujitsu when it comes to the world. But when we understand community, we understand coexistence, and the idea that we rise together as well. That's what distinguishes us from other races of people. That me being liberated is only, it's me not reaching my full self. If you're not liberated too,
right.
There has to be some idea that my true liberation means that we're liberated. And we talk about this not only in America, but around the world, in the diaspora. One of the reasons why I moved to South Africa years ago was this idea that can I truly feel, liberated as a black man when someone can say something about Africa in a negative light, and then me not really having a retort, like, Africa is, undemocratic and and I can have a retort about other European countries and things like that. But at some point I said, those brothers and sisters in Africa, in the West Indies, in Brazil, and in all those places, those are my brothers too. How do I build up that community? How do I help liberate that community at the same time? Because I can see that as through Morehouse and other institutions that I've had, I've been liberated. And so my responsibility is to liberate others.
I think that's beautiful, bro. I think that that's great, man. I think that, you talked about being global and having a global mindset. I think that, again, we have to build in the ancillary like items in those communities so they can get that, right? Like, again, bro, you went to Morehouse. You can't escape learning about the diaspora. You couldn't escape learning about blackness. You couldn't, and you are married to a woman that went to school across the street in a place that's equally as historic, right? Like, your kids have no choice. You know what I mean? They have no choice at all. So when we talk about how do we shape these narratives and images of Black America moving forward, I think you have to expose our young people to a lot of stuff, and you have to show success more than what is being categorically shown as being successful. Let me give you an example. I'm sure that if a show like this with two smart college educated brothers talking about ideas and fixing education, if it got the type of attention that rappers got, if it got the type of attention that one of the housewives shows got, or that ball players got, right? Yeah. I think you have a lot more people being like, oh snap, I want to do that. You know what I'm saying? I think that like there are people that tried to do. I mean, remember Run's House? I remember that. I love that show. That show was so wholesome. It was like, oh, it's Rev Run with his family and his kids, and they doing cool, chill stuff. But they got canceled. You know what I'm saying? Because enough people wasn't watching because it didn't have all the drama that kind of goes into it. So now we got young people that's not even young people. I know old people. You know what I'm saying? People older than us that drum up drama all day because they're living in their own kind of sitcom. They're living in their own reality TV show. So in order to start shaping different narratives, you got to show a different side. I always push rappers to do this. I love Jay-Z and 50 and Nas and them, right? Here's the thing that I love about them and that I wish they would do more though. Nas about to get 100 M's for investing in Coinbase, which is going public.
Saw that.
50 Cent is one of the most brilliant business minds, regardless how you feel about him. This is somebody who mastered the music market, had the biggest debut album in history, and now has taken over TV or whatever, right?
Vitamin water.
Right. And Jay-Z is just a super businessman along with Diddy. Nicki Minaj got her things, but we don't hear them. We don't get to see them do that part as much. We don't get to see them talk about it, right? Like there was this thing where I loved it. 50 Cent was going through his daily routine. He gets up at like 4:30 every day. He works out. He only eats this. Then he goes and runs. Then he takes his meetings, right? He does his music stuff. Then he goes and like with his acting coach. You know what I'm saying? It was just really breaking down a day that has like where he has evolved from who he was from the South Side Jamaica Queens hustler dude to like this business mogul. If you get to see that, I think it does change those images. I think when you watch Mav Carter and LeBron James and their business moves and just the other things that they do, I think that those things will help change that piece. But that's not what gets clicks. That's not what gets the likes. And those aren't the conversations, right? Like if it ain't bleeding, it ain't leading. Yeah. And we got to be the people that change what that looks like. So me coming on here with my fronts is just me. That's just who I am. I'm not no thug dude. I ain't never did nothing illegal. And to the educated people, I'm not going to do nothing to you. I'm not in the streets. I just wear my crown on my teeth. That's all. That's what I say when people ask me. So I think that it's like when you get to see more authenticity doing the other things that you might want to do, I think that we'll start to have different images moving forward. But if we continue to just box ourselves in and limit ourselves to what's out there, then you're going to keep getting exactly what you get.
I'm glad you said that. I think when people ask this question, I think it's how you frame it, right? Some people are going to frame, how do you shape narratives, images of Black Americans towards the greater America, right? Because we're seeing how America treats us, and we're seeing how they're able to substantiate that based on some narrative that has been put out in the media that has been sort of just carried. And it's a defense. I did this because, Black men are this, or I did this because Black women are that. And I can show you a million examples of how on television, music, and everything else. But I think for me, getting back to sort of narratives around our children, I think that my wife and I made a conscious decision to move to a predominantly Black community in the DC metro area, right? Prince George's County is, the Black county, if you think about anyone from this area. But we made a decision that we wanted our children to see Black images and images of Black America where other people who look like me did not prioritize that. And that's not me coming at anybody, but that's them saying, I'm going to move to a community where the people, the business owners, the police officers, the community leaders do not look like my children. My children know small business owners. My children know entrepreneurs. My children know. And so when my daughter starts her own business, it's not a mystery. And this is also historical. My mother was a small business owner. My grandmother was a small business owner. My great aunt was a small business owner. So there's history. But for many children, okay, Dad, you're talking about it, but I haven't seen it. And so for those of us who said, and yourself, you moved to Chicago and Oakland, where you can move to areas where, and this is so again around narratives where if it's predominantly white and white ice is colder, right. Idea that we've said I'm gonna move to a community. I'm gonna move to a problem-like community when it's dog whistle saying, well, the schools are better. Like, who says who? Or they're better for children who look like yours or for their children? Or crime is like all that dog whistle stuff where the data doesn't really hold up when you press them. We have to make conscious decisions, particularly moving forward in the future, to put our children around people who are also liberated. Because you can't talk liberation at home, and then we go outside, the children are literally based on the community they're in, have to police themselves, their hairstyles, what they wear to school. I mean, if I see another article about a child having to defend their hairstyle, I'm like, where does that come from? What school you in where you can't wear locks? Like, what school is that?
Right.
Come from? That's not happening. And so this idea, we have to make conscious decisions and not just talk liberation, but let me see where you're spending your money. Let me see who you're putting in front of your children, because our children, the one thing about young people they could tell BS a mile away.
Right.
And they could say, Dad, I know you're talking about it. I know you're talking about tolerance for certain groups, but I see how you talk about them when you're not on camera. When you're with mommy, I see when you talk about this, Dad, but I see where you spend your money. They talk about liberation, but look where we live. People around us, are not liberated. The people who look like me are not around us. And so we have to have those conversations where it's not just words, it's what we put in front of our children, because they're going to be the ones that carry a lot of this legacy of liberation moving forward. And they're going to be able to discern, Dad, you talked about it, but we didn't really see it.
But I even think, that liberation was not a word that was I talked about when I was a kid or heard about. It just wasn't. We were just trying to survive, bro. Like 4 shelters, 4 of them, 2 in Oakland, 2 in San Francisco. And Sherry, thank you so much for enjoying the show. And please share the show. And anybody listening, please take a moment and share the show with a comment, keep commenting. But and I think one of the things that I would love for somebody to investigate, right? I mean, here's the question for us. We've heard about your upbringing, and I love listening to your upbringing. It shows me Black excellence. It shows me somebody who knows their roots, somebody who knows their grandfather's grandfather's grandfather, who has that built-in pride, right? Like, I didn't learn till I was an adult that my parents had any ties to the Till family or to Hampton or whomever, right? I just didn't know, and when I did learn, I was like, well, how the hell? How does my dad know these things and you still end up on drugs, right? I mean, I'm sure it can happen, but I'm just saying for me. So when we talk about that, I think a bigger question is, what were the conditions that had to happen for a Charles Cole and a Curtis Valentine with these very, very different upbringings? I went to a state school. You feel me? Like, I had a basketball scholarship, didn't take the scholarship and wanted to stay kind of local, kind of far enough away from home where I didn't have to see people if I didn't want to, but close enough. And I just knew I wasn't going to the league, so I didn't want to do that chase, because I had a lot of homies that did that, along with somebody that went to a Morehouse, right? Like, how did we end up in this moment, in this space together with these very vastly different, upbringings, right? And I think that's, and what does the future need to look like, that regardless of how somebody is coming up or what's happening around them or whatnot, that the kid that grew up like me has an opportunity or a chance to be working next to a Curtis Valentine. Listen, bro, I tried to do the math one time. Like, there's like these things you can find where it's like, if you were homeless, the percentage of you going to college drops. All right. The likelihood drops. If you had a parent that was incarcerated, the likelihood drops. If you had this, it drops. And I was doing it to where my number was like less than 1%. Right. And especially for me to end up being a doctor. So it's like, yo, why do Black kids, right? I had to break so many barriers, bro. I have to be so many types of a trailblazer that like the struggle to get here. That's why I'm wearing fronts, because I done been through so much shit, and I still feel like it's all gonna get taken away. I live with that every day. I have plotted my exit from this field already, because I have to think in that way. I have already taken whatever bread that I've gotten. There's parts that I've put off to the side, just because you never know, right? Like, I'm some type of like fucking mob boss or something. Like, no, but that's what I'm conditioned to do, right? I'm conditioned to hoard. I'm conditioned to have this deficit model. And so I don't want kids to have to get to this place the way that I got here. I got residue from that. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's residual pieces. And, and that's why I say what I want to on these education spaces, because I'm used to there being real consequences, right? I never understood, Curtis, I would go to a school board meeting, and I know we got to get that other that question up there. So go ahead and bring it up, Mimi, and I'll tackle it. But I know that I would go to school board meetings, and people would be afraid to make a comment, and I just be like, "What you afraid of? Like you're afraid of like somebody tweeting you? Like you afraid of like one of these old white ladies that come to all of these, like having something to say to you? Like people ran into my house in East Oakland and jumped my dad in front of us. You know what I'm saying? Like they were like people showed up with real guns and like things were really, really happening. You know what I'm saying? Like, what the hell do I look like being afraid to speak up on some education stuff?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's it. I just want to make that juxtaposition clear because you and I have some stake in this place. We got some success under our belt. But we got here in very, very different ways. And it's not just about getting here, but it's about getting here whole. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of work I have to do to be made whole again. You feel me? So I think that it's like, you know, but that's one, as I think about the future, I don't want somebody to get here having to go through what I went through, because you can't even appreciate it and enjoy it when you got that type of residue.
I mean, let me say this, because, you know, I want people to understand within our community, there are, you know, again, there are different income levels, there are different, you know, education levels, but we all, I think, universally have a one paycheck mindset, a one paycheck away mindset. This idea that no matter where I go, no matter where I live, that it could all be taken away. And so my parents are not college educated at all. My dad was in the Marines.
My dad was a Marine too.
Yeah, my dad was a Marine. We got a house on a GI Bill. My mom, you know, was office assistant, kind of did work like that, but eventually started her own small business in early childhood when I was like in middle school and high school. But again, we didn't have a lot of savings. You know, we didn't buy new cars. You know, we lived on a sort of working class community. But I saw friends whose fathers were incarcerated. You know, I was on the block when things happened. And so even though you don't grow up in it, it's hard to divorce yourself from the reality of your community, especially when you're a communal people like we are as African Americans. And so to your point, I'm always thinking about it could be taken away from me too. And it's almost like you're never really as comfortable as you think we should be. Right. Educated or not, you know, when America catches, you know, when America sneezes, you know,
flu, baby,
catches the flu, because we understand that when COVID hit and when the recession hit, middle class Black Americans was always hit the hardest. Right. And the folks was losing jobs and losing homes, and the mortgage crisis. Prince George's County was hit really hard when it came to the foreclosure crisis. And these are college educated Black folks who might have thought it was sweet, but we have that PTSD when it comes to it could all be taken away, but financially, but also that's a system. Like there's no education. There's no amount of money I could ever have to you know, give me immune from being pulled over and being killed. And so I think that is a universal thing that we have as a people that connects us. And so you say how we get here together, because we're literally the same cat, because the world sees us as the same cat. But,
and listen, bro, like, and there's levels to this, right? Like, I'm still a square. I was a square then, right? There are people from my neighborhood that'll be like, bro, but you had your pops there, you had this and you had that. So like, again, it's levels to it, right? Like, this ain't the oppression Olympics, right? But what I'm saying is that just the Black experience of kind of being in this space and trying to push up there, like, what's the purpose of doing, what's the use of doing it if you can't like get to that place and enjoy it? But I think, you know, Mimi got this question up here, but I love that pushback. I love that dialogue. So thank you for that. I think we should probably clip that part. But how can we go about coalition building to secure a future oriented towards self-determination? I'll start on this one. And I'm gonna start because I think you're going to be far more optimistic than I am. And we should have that. I am not the optimistic cat. I am the dude. There's a chapter in my book that starts with a Tupac lyric, get my weight up with my hate and pay him back when I'm bigger. That song and that verse helped me out so much. I built so much stuff out of anger and just resentment, fam. Like, and so, but you don't really want other people to do that. But I work really well mad. I don't know why. It sucks. When I'm mad, I can go for 20 in the game. You know what I'm saying? I'm happy. It's productive. I don't know what it is. But when we talk about coalition building a secure future, I mean, listen, man, just because it's Black folks, we all ain't in the same boat, man. There's a lot of Black folks that don't fool with other Black folks, or they get to a place. I mean, listen, man, there's a Jack and Jill contingent of people that might not rock with a type of people like me. You know what I'm saying? When I was in Kentucky living with my grandmother, that's the first time I heard about debutantes, right? And I just remember I was like some dusty kid, right? Like I remember they had their like nice dresses and stuff like that on, bro. Man, them moms was looking. Do not go speak to that boy ever. That boy cannot come around here, right? You know what I'm saying? And I don't think that there's a we all in this together type of mentality. I think that there's black people and then there are groups within black people. So I actually don't know how you do that coalition building. What I would say is get you a few like-minded people that feel like you, and y'all ain't got to feel the same about everything. But if I can find some people and we agree on 2 or 3 things that's germane to our survival and thriving eventually, I can do work with them. I ain't got to agree with all that stuff. I ain't got to like everything they do. And I think that it's also, in order to do that coalition building, we have to be so determined around the goal. The goal has to be the driver. And what I mean by that is that we allow our people to be swayed and pushed and moved by the tides of social media, the tides of popular opinion, or whatever the case is. And that happens when you have no foundation. Where there is no vision, the people perish. And here's the thing. Our progressive group, our black group, Twitter, like super woke Twitter, or whatever the case is, fam, like, because they not on code and like what's trying to happen, anytime somebody drop a bomb in there, you just see them like fraying and straying, right? Whereas these conservatives, who I'm not necessarily a fan of at all, but when they get on code and mission, they on code and mission, yo. They like, I don't know, I don't care what that politician did. We need that vote. I don't care what cool. I don't know what about. Well, he went to what? He went to a slave cookout thing. He did. Damn, that's crazy. Cuz hey, I'm still voting for cuz, right? Like they be on point with that stuff, man. And I'm not saying that we have to allow for whack stuff to happen. You know what I'm saying? But I do think in our community, if we don't really get the basis of restorative justice, meaning that we are correcting to restore as opposed to correcting to tar and feather and cancel somebody, I don't think we'll ever get to that place, because if that's the mentality, any of us can be taken out at any time, because those winds sway, baby. They sway with the weather. So now that y'all heard my morbid ass answer, we're going to pass it to Curtis. And Curtis is going to tell us how to do coalition building in a much nicer, in a better, optimistic way, I'm assuming. Go ahead.
So our next podcast gonna be Good Cop, Bad Cop.
Nah, not cop. We got to get something else, bro.
Captain Sunshine. Let me tell you, man.
The lady said, I'm a realist. I am a super realist, and I appreciate that. All I'm just sharing is from my experience. So let
me give how, as I interpret it right now in 2021. I think we are in an era, and this is I think social media allows for this to happen. We are in an era of collective wins and collective losses. And the collective losses kind of, in some way unite us. This idea that I don't live in a community where, my life is threatened and, all these different things. But yet when I see it happen, I have a natural reaction to it. And so it bothers me to know, and even though I may not have, I may not have a fear in my own community, I just know that there are people who look like me who deal with this. And so that collective, even the Jack and Jill folks and the folks who, who move to certain communities, I think they still have to understand that the things that they try to escape are not that far away. So the collective losses are ones that kind of keep us on our toes. The collective wins are also ones that I often celebrate as well. This idea that, people, when a school gets funded and when, someone gets a job promotion or someone gets an opportunity, the response from folks, man, like sometimes I get overwhelmed by it. I'm like, you don't know this person. You're not going to benefit directly from this. But because, again, we have this community, this connection, and I think I hope we're building off of, and what I'm seeing, particularly through Real Men Teach, is this idea of, Kurt, man, every time you post someone right now, we're in our Real Men Teach. It was Real Men Teach 100. Now it's Real Men Teach 365. The folks who are reaching out and saying, Curtis, I don't know this brother, but I'm just happy to see this example of brothers being put out there. And so I'm just going to share this. I'm going to buy a hoodie so the scholarship money goes to somebody. And so that sort of collective win is one that, again, for me, that coalition building around, you know what? One, if I win, I'm going to get the love from the community. But two, and I did this before, it's this idea of if you don't care who gets the credit, you can get a lot done. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of let's get rid of the ego conversation. And so you and I coming together for this podcast is a perfect example. And so this is kind of, if this is the last thing I say, the idea that we had two people who in their own right were standing on their own too, right. 10 toes, right? And we came together, and Mimi, definitely shout out Mimi Dubs. Mimi Dubs said, I think you all should come together. And then Mimi right here, she would tell you zero ego, zero, whose face should be bigger, whose name should be first. Let's say this, let's say that. It's like, bro, are we on the same mission going in the same direction? Then ego's out the way. I don't care who gets the credit. The work will stand for itself. And so the coalitions I'm seeing moving forward, folks, my man like Sharif and the Center for Black Educated Development, today, Real Men Teach signed on to a petition that they're putting together to really challenge the Biden administration around people diversity. Mm-hmm. When I sent to my logo and my quote, I didn't say, hey, bro, make sure mine's the same size as Profound Gentleman and make sure it's the same size as my man Block KC out in Kansas City. Don't, hey, bro, because I want to make sure that my funders see this and all that stuff. Nah. I'm like, Sharif, bro, this is your show. I believe in you. I believe in your mission. Whether Real Men Teach gets credit for it or not, that's not important. Are we moving in the same direction? So coalition building is looking a lot different than it did years ago because we all have this collective loss, but also we all can see there's opportunities for collective wins.
That was beautiful. I told you that's why he should have went ahead and went. You kept talking about collective wins. I wanted to be like, what collective wins? I hear you, but I like that example, so I'm not going to super push on that. And I know that we getting pushed into final thoughts.
Hey, let me say one thing. So yesterday, I'm on Twitter and I see, a brother wearing a Real Men Teach stuff. He tweeted me. He talking about his school, and I inboxed him. He says, "Yeah, man, I heard about you through 8 Black Hands." And I'm like, you see that? 8 Black Hands brought me on. You know what I'm saying? I was there understanding that you all have such a following, and I was able to you all brought me in. That was a collective. That was coalition building. And there are things that are and the ripple effects go out. That he didn't feel like Curtis or 8 Black Hands were tussling with who gets top billing. It was, I saw 5 brothers on equal footing moving in the same direction, and that motivated me to want to become part of what you're doing, and vice versa. There are people who are going to become, who are going to follow you and follow me because of the brotherhood. And so for me, that collective win motivates me every day.
Well, I get that. I mean, I like it, man. I think that's beautiful. I think when I think about those things, man, I'm looking at like, I don't know, man. I guess I and I know we need to go into our final thoughts, but I'll say this and then you can do your final thought. I think that everything you said is absolutely correct. I am somebody, for a long time, I wanted to go to Paris. I wanted to go travel, and I was trying to do it with the homies, right? Because you can go fast alone, but you go further with people, right? And every time we're supposed to go, these Negroes just didn't have it together. And year after year, I just missed the trip, right? And then I was just like, I'm going on my own. And if people want to come, they'll come. And so I think that my philosophy in life, I've had to do so much on my own. Listen, I went to 11 elementary schools, so there was not a lot of coalition building. There was not a lot of lifelong friends. There was not a lot of there was a lot of surviving, making sure you're good, and also don't do too good in front of people because you become food for those people. And I know what that's also like as well. So again, not trying to be Dr. Morbid at all. I think what you said was beautiful, but also I think you have such a rich community around you and such a rich community spirit. And you went to a HBCU that preaches that. You went to Africa on that hype. Like, you are raising your kids in that. I think that is just the waters you've been baptized in. And mine has been very much that of like survival, very much that of like scarcity, right? And you try to shift it, right? But when my molecular structure and DNA got shifted and changed around that, it's hard. I'm 37. When I've been doing that for 30 some odd years, it's hard to just switch it around and turn it on a dime. So even when we was joking around earlier, it's like, yo, people get invited to whatever, right? We was joking, but in my mind, I'm still like, well, it is what it is. Like, I go build my own shit. It's fine. Like, I'm not mad at it, because my thing is, I don't think anybody owes me anything, right? Like I actually don't have any issue with it, but I do move on rather quickly. You feel me? So, but let's go into but I love this, man. And I love what you created, bro. So, congrats on everything you've done with Real Men Teach. This has been an amazing 3-episode arc. And if the people want it and push us, maybe we'll do something else in the future. But why don't you lead us with your final thoughts for today's episode and for this series as a whole, man?
Yeah, man. I mean, again, when we dreamt up this idea of doing a 3-episode podcast, and right now, if the love is out there, you respond back to us, tweet us, hit us on Facebook, Instagram. If you wanted to keep us going, then let us know. It was really this idea that, when we came with the idea, educated and dope, it's a word that oftentimes people, associate with both of us, and they did it sort of in isolation, but it was authenticity. It was, here are two brothers who could be their truest selves, and at the same time, stand toe to toe with those who aren't, those in education, those in social activism. And so what I said I want to do is I just want to come be me, tell my story, and hope that it'll resonate with, if just one person, then it was worth it. And so for those who listened in today's episode, please go back and check the other 2. You will hear the story of the history, the arc of an individual, but also more importantly, a people. And so if you listen to this and you feel a connection to my story, to the story of our people, to Charles' story, then keep fighting. I think, the lesson that I hope people take from what I'm doing from Real Men Teach, it's, start something, and let God, let the universe make a space for you, because it will, but it requires you to start something. And so what we learned from our ancestors was they started something. Liberatory education is nothing until you start it, and you will keep, trying a little bit, doing a little this, do a little bit of that, but you have to start something. And so my final word is, keep loving one another, keep supporting one another, and start something.
That's what's up, man. That was beautiful, man. As I go into my final thoughts, first off, just to thank Mimi Dove just for putting this together and just for being just amazing. And if you don't know her, you should definitely get to know her. She is just an amazing convener of like talent and of people. And she's just dope. She's brilliant. She's smart, and she's thoughtful, and she cares about our people. And she has an interesting story herself. Hopefully one day she'll share it. And just to thank Curtis, I know you busy, brother, and you didn't have to do this. And so I appreciate it, man. And, I hopefully we'll get to do some more stuff like this. I think, for me, I thought this was really dope. I think 2 different personalities that kind of arrived in the same place and having admiration for each other's work, just you all got to watch us build a relationship in front of you. We didn't like really just super know each other beforehand. We were familiar, and I know there's always been that respect there. But to really just I love listening to the stories about your family. I love listening to about your daughter and entrepreneurship. I think that stuff is beautiful, man. I think that's super dope. And so thank you for that blessing. I think for me, man, somebody asked me this, and I'll leave this as part of my final thought. Somebody said, Charles, you just work all the time. Why do you work so hard? And I was just like, from childhood to now, I have just as many friends that are dead and killed that are alive still. Where at the place where I come from, death is just a thing that happens. And I wanted to leave a legacy. So I build these shows, I do these books, I do these articles, because I don't know when that's going to be done. And I'm not I'm not trying to be morbid. It's just how I think about things. You can really be gone tomorrow. So that one book is out, but I'm writing the next book right now. Right. It's called, Crack Baby Residue, to actually go deeper into some of the stuff that we talked about, because there was no roadmap for me. I've wasted so much money and so much time and so much heartache and so many mistakes because there was just no guidance. And so I'm writing the book that I needed when I was younger. So for whoever else is kind of growing up in that same way. So when we do shows like this, when you do an educated and dope show, you need to hear from people like Curtis to understand how he navigated and got there and how I got there, because there's so many different ways to get there. So if we're talking about next steps, I think that the next step that folks should really be thinking about is, what is freedom to you? What is liberatory education to you? And what role can you play? Because here's the thing. We all can play a role. We all can play a role, and you don't have to, but don't say you couldn't. You know what I mean? There's something that I don't care if you got a PhD or you got a second grade education. There's impact that all of us can make. You don't have to be in a school setting. It can be, listen, if you can coach, go coach. I have so many more bonds with my basketball coaches than I do with any of my teachers, except for one who also was a basketball coach and played basketball, right? Like that was just the way to kind of get to me. There's a role for everybody to play. So I think in next steps, man, it's really just defining the type of legacy you want to leave and not feeling guilty about what you've done to get to this point, but striving just to leave more in the world than we took from it. I've taken a lot from this world. I do a lot of dumb shit. And I'm trying to like be better and lead a place better. So that's my final thought. And those are my final, my next step. If you want to go some next steps, go ahead, brother.
Now I'm going to say, you know, to keep it a band, next steps, you want to continue this conversation, go to my man's website, buy his audio book that just came out today.
There you go.
Man, go to the website, buy some of his apparel. Support. I mean, I think that's the conversation. That's the push that we have to have. I like conversations, but with the work that we are doing, and we talked about this a lot last session, which is we are helping people through our resources, through our work. Real Men Teach is a scholarship fund to keep Black and Latino male educators in the classroom. So you go to Real Men Teach, you go to you go to my man Charles Cole's website, you go to his Facebook page, you go to his YouTube channel, support this brother, could keep the conversation going, put our resources where our hearts are and where where the future is. And you'd be surprised what we can do when we come together for the work of ensuring everyone is liberated in education, but just in general, liberated.
There you go. And I put it up on the screen for you. So that's the website. You can go there now. And the book is called Beyond Grit and Resilience. And our producer does not play about us going over time. This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Mimi. Thank you so much, Curtis. I really, really appreciate y'all for everything that y'all have done. And hopefully we get to do it again, man. Y'all are really talented. And this was dope. We just started to catch our stride. So I'm a little sad that it's stopping. But, y'all know me. I'm going to be producing other stuff too. So with that being said, we will see y'all on the other side. You have been listening to another episode of Educated and Dope. Again, if you missed the other ones, you got to go catch them things like the homie just told you to do. You don't want to miss it. And I'm going to take us out. With that being said, peace.